Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Thursday, the last of our video chats and the last of our adult mentor video chats. Welcome. I'm just like making sure comments are coming through. All right. So thank you for joining us. It is also my birthday today. So happy celebratory video chat birthday edition. And I'm Sarah Nicolas. I am on the board for Pitchwars, and I am also the agent liaison this year. Kelly is here. Hey, Kelly. Good to see you. I'm on the board for Pitchwars. Yes, I said that. Okay, cool. So if you don't know what Pitchwars is, if you're just kind of like stumbling across this video and you've never heard of Pitchwars before, it is a annual volunteer-run mentoring event where mentors who are usually established writers or industry professionals will choose a author to mentor, an unagented author, and they'll do a round of revisions on their manuscript, and then they'll help them prepare for submission, and then it ends in an agent showcase. So if you want to learn more about Pitchwars, you don't know a lot about Pitchwars, you can go to pitchwars.org right there and find out a whole bunch more information about it. Our mentors are open to wishlist questions now. Excuse me, I had just had pizza before this and I have a little bit of indigestion. It's fine. Yeah, so they can answer wishlist questions, so feel free to ask those. However, they will not be answering anything that's like a pre-pitch. So if it's like a specific thing about like a specific, concept that represents your book, we won't be answering those. So just a heads up on that. If you are watching on Twitter or Facebook, it's like embedded in the Twitter website. You want to click on through to YouTube because that is where we're going to have all the conversation is going to be taking place on YouTube. So click on through to YouTube so you can ask a question there. Our social media director, Lee Mar, is on Twitter today. She's going to be live tweeting some of the things we're saying. And she is also going to try to bring over any questions if she sees them on Twitter, but sometimes she'll miss them. So if you want to make sure that your question gets asked, click on through to YouTube so that we can see it here. Also, Lodestar is our comment moderator today. So thank you. You will see him in the comments as DT. Thank you so much for volunteering to do that today. He's just here to make sure we aren't attacked by any trolls. So you can go ahead and start asking questions now, and we'll jump right in as soon as the mentors introduce themselves. Submissions are open on September 27th, so we're getting very close. And then we also have on Friday, there's a YA mentor chat, I believe. I hope I'm remembering this correctly. And then on Saturday, during the afternoon Eastern, there is an all mentor #AskMentor Twitter chat. So if you want to ask people questions there, that's going to be your last opportunity to do it before submissions are open. And then you can also go back and watch some of the previous video chats that we've done. There's a playlist on my YouTube channel right here. So if you want to watch those, feel free to do that. So now we're going to have the mentors introduce themselves. We have 5 mentors this hour and 5 more mentors coming on the next hour. And so we're going to start with Rochelle.
Gotta unmute. Hi, I'm Rochelle Karina. I write romance and romantic suspense and thrillers. I was a 2018 mentee with Laura Brown and Tiff Marcello, who are awesome. Unfortunately, not mentoring this year. So this is my first year mentoring, but my background is in editorial magazines and newspaper editing, and also spent most of my career writing. Anyway, that's me. Hi. Coming at you from Baltimore, Maryland.
You're going to unmute. Hi, everyone. My name is Mia P. Manansala. Again, the pronunciation, Manansala. Just because I've gotten a couple of questions on how to pronounce my name, which I appreciate, by the way, that you're trying to, respect me by asking how you pronounce my name. So I'm an adult mystery writer. My debut... Oh, can you see this? Arsenic and Adult. That's right. I'm extra. I got my book cover as a phone cover. You only debut once. It comes out May 4th, 2021. It's a Filipino-themed culinary cozy, and that's what I specialize in. I was a 2017 Pitchwars mentee. Kelly Garrett was my mentor at the time, and I have co-mentored with Kelly 2018, 2019, and now again this year in 2020. Looking forward to get to know all you.
Hi, I'm Sequoia Nagamatsu, and this is my first year at Pitchwars, coming at you from Minneapolis. My first book was a short story collection. I'm here with my robot dog, Calvino. I'm going to turn him off. My first story collection was called Where We Go When All We Were Is Gone, and that was from Black Lawrence Press. And that was a collection inspired by Japanese folklore and pop culture. I have 2 novels coming out from William Morrow HarperCollins, and also Bloomsbury in the UK. The first one's called How High We Go in the Dark, and the second one is called Girl Zero. Generally, most of my writing falls in that literary fiction, hybrid science fiction realm. And apart from that, I teach creative writing at St. Olaf College.
What's up, guys? I'm Clay Harmon. I was a mentee in 2016, and I am mentoring for the first time this year. I'm an epic fantasy and speculative fiction writer, and I am represented by Joshua Gomez of Jabberwocky Literary Agency. So yeah, excited to be here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Trisha Lynn, and I am a 2016 mentee. This is my first year as a mentor. But I got to mentee with the beautiful Rebecca Yaros, who was awesome. My debut came out in 2019. I'm taking a note out of Kelly's book here. So Moonlight and Whiskey. There you go. I liked how Kelly did it. And that was also my pitchwars book. And I am going to be taking subs for several different romance subgenres and women's fiction.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone, for volunteering to be here tonight and answering everyone's questions. We already have a lot of questions, so we're going to go ahead and dive right in. And Lodestar asked, what inspires mentors to participate in pitch wars? What do you get out of it?
I'll go.
All right.
Dive in. I'll jump in, I guess. For me, it was watching the community and seeing how much the community learned from the mentors. I submitted to Pitch Wars twice before I got in the third time. And that's what inspired me, is I wanted to be that person. I wanted to be that person who was giving a newer writer that encouragement and that hope. So what do I get out of it? I get the joy of watching somebody else have that wonderful aha moment. So that's my excitement.
And I will say, I just wanted to point out, Rochelle has been volunteering with us on the blog. Yeah, they do a lot of work and they hardly ever get any attention for it. So I like to make sure we know as much as possible. Everyone knows as much as possible how much work they do. All right, go ahead.
Well, I think I would have to agree with Rochelle. It's definitely community. And I also remember what it was like to be a newer writer and feel completely lost. And this community just took me in and said, here, let us teach you what this means and what that means. And that's before I ever entered Pitch Wars. But beyond that, it's definitely just, yeah, somebody gave this to me. Please, I want to give it to someone else. Let me pay it forward.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think as I teach creative writing at a college, and sometimes I get to have those aha moments with students. But when you're getting like a biology student that just happens to be a really natural, wonderful writer, they kind of disappear. And then I'm kind of like, well, what happened to that writer? Are they still writing? And I've been watching my wife mentor for the last, I think, year or two, and watching her experiences, working with somebody on a one-on-one basis and getting to sort of like be there at the start of their career is something that I really wanted to be a part of. Really helping a writer that just needed that little extra push to get out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everyone else said it better than I could probably. My mentor in 2016 was Judy Warren, and she did so much for me that I could never, like, how do I repay this person? And I decided that I couldn't. So the next best thing was to become a mentor myself and to give what she gave to me to someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like it sounds so cliche, like we're just playing lip service, but community means so much, especially because writing can be so solitary. It can be really opaque. A lot of times you don't know what you don't know, because how can you when there's not a lot of transparency? And like paying it forward can mean so much, especially, for me as a writer of color. Having a mentor who was a woman of color in mystery in my field, like meant so much to me. And so like once you are able to take that one step forward, I fully believe in reaching back to pull others up with you. So I'm also, I was an English language instructor for 10 years. So I've been a teacher for so long. Now a certified book coach. I just got hired as the youth services desk assistant at my library. So like books, reading, literacy, writing, like I'm obviously very passionate about that.
Yeah, and the mentor community is so great. I plan author events for a library. That's my day job. And since we've gone virtual, Pitchwars mentors have taught so many workshops for our writers, all volunteer too. And we've been doing like these writing tip videos on our YouTube, and they've all been a lot of them been doing that. Like my former mentee who later became my co-mentor, and then another mentor were my beta readers for my last book. Like everyone is so giving in this community. It's great. If you hear any children screaming, they're fine. They're playing. Those are my nieces. All right. So do we have any mentors who are looking at sci-fi on this chat? Okay, I wasn't sure. But Jimmy, if you want to ask again in a little bit, I think we have a couple more sci-fi mentors later, but I'll go ahead and ask y'all. I'm noticing a lot of mentors are turned off by repping harder sci-fi and space operas. Is it because this genre is not as trendy? Does anybody know?
Honestly,
Well, for me,
I'm sorry. I was just going to say,
go ahead.
I think they're lovely to read, but I don't know what I'm doing with it. I wouldn't know how to mentor it. So there you go. Sorry.
Yep. Same here. Like I write science fiction, but I write science fiction towards sort of the literary end of the spectrum. And I don't really have a whole lot of experience with harder science fiction.
All right. And Jimmy, I think Mike is in the comments too. So Mike, if you want to comment on that, feel free to do that. Mike Mammy. After you've selected your mentees, how soon do you get to work on the manuscript after the announcements are made? In most cases, they're actually already working on their edit letter before the announcement is made, because they've made their decision a couple of days ago, and so they're working on the edit letter. Does any of you want to comment on that? No.
I mean, I'm a first time mentor, so I can't really say. But Judy, she got my edit letter to me like the day after the announcement, so I doubt she did it in 24 hours. So she's definitely working on it before that.
Yeah, they have a deadline that they have to do it before, but basically as soon as the announcements are made, they can start working with you.
Yeah. Especially for me. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say if they have the time, because some mentors, they have other things going on, they may not be able to jump right in right away.
Yeah, well, because like I'm part of a mentor team, so Kelly, it's very important for me and Kelly to present a united front. So we each take our own notes when we do this, but then we compare our notes, we talk together, we do the letter, we have a Google Doc, so we work on the letter together. Like, I'm never ever going to just like send an email to the mentee without like running it by her, and vice versa. Like we want to make sure we have a united front. We're not sending like contradicting opinions or anything like that. So we prepare way in advance. And then we send it pretty quickly. Like we're Kelly and I are very eager to, but we also let like, especially if this is the first time you've ever gotten an edit letter, it can be very overwhelming. So even though we send it right away, we're like, if you need time to process this, prepare questions, think about how you feel, like that's fine. We just are so excited to work with you. Welcome to the team. So like, don't, like, if you get an edit letter right away, don't think, you know, you have to immediately start working that second, you know, it's just acknowledge it and be like, yay.
All right. Maxwell asks, I've been told my first line is a really good hook. Would you recommend saving it for only the first line of the story or also using it in the query as a query hook?
I think I can talk to this a little bit because the hook or the first line in my debut is really an attention grabber too. It was, I have a porn habit. I think that the shock value alone was worth leaving it out of the query because, I mean, from what I heard when my agent read it, she busted out laughing. So because she wasn't expecting it at all. So I came up with something else to put in my query that's not in the manuscript itself. And you'll have to forgive me, but this is the Adult Swim. So it was something about a girl getting laid. And that's in the query instead of the porn habit. But I know you guys are just going to think that I write just, you know, filth, but that's okay.
I think it's funny because the last chat we did with you, Tricia, it was like almost all romance mentors. And today it's like not, not so much.
But I'm more comfortable now because I've done one of these.
Yeah.
So, and well, and also I know both Clay and Rochelle. So yeah. But yeah, for me, it was worth it for that shock value alone because that immediately had attention.
I would say, I mean, the first line in your book has to do with the very first scene. So if that scene adequately reflects, you know, the overall plot, then I can see why you would use that same first line. But, you know, in a query, you're trying to be as clear and concise as possible. So, you know, they say kill your darlings. If it's a really good line, you always have to ask yourself, is it the most appropriate line or is it the best line?
I'll chime in and sort of echo Tricia. Even if you've got a really, really great line, that's your opening line, I think save it because you want that impact. And your query is about summarizing the whole book, the whole story, and really getting to the conflict and the stakes. That's what you're trying to hook with in the query. And that first line having a just right out the gate, I want that. When I open that first page of a book, I want the first line to slap me in the face. So save it.
All right. Mike and Kelly are trading jabs in the comments. Surprising no one. No, they're great. Okay, so we have a lot of questions about openings today. So a lot of manuscripts first chapters start off in the wrong place. How do you know where is a good place to start to grab the interest of a reader? I am also interested in hearing your answers.
Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like okay. I feel like I'm just like dominating all the questions. I'm sorry. I think at least, particularly in romance and women's fiction, you almost never start in the right place. I never start in the right place. I think it's something that you know after you've gotten that first draft out where you go, okay, this started slow, or I could have used a little bit more buildup here. Or at least until you get through a certain, you know, a stage in the book. But I wouldn't like stress over it about if you think it's starting too slow or too fast. It's not a hard fix. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents though.
I want to jump in and agree with that. I think, you know, if this is a fairly early draft, you need to allow yourself time to understand what your book's trying to do, who your characters are. And once you know that, you'll have a better sense of where to start the book in terms of giving the reader enough time to embrace the journey, but not so much time that the book seems like it's overly long.
I think it also depends on genre expectations. Speaking as like a mystery writer, like, so my pitchwars book, because it's like it took place in the world of Comic-Con, so like I was really invested in people getting to know these characters, people getting to know this world, which I found fascinating. But like that dead body didn't show up till like 60 pages in. And, Kelly was my mentor, and she's like, I thought this was a mystery. What's going on? Like, like the funny banter, the sarcastic, like it was fun for me, but it was not the right place, because you can world build without just like dialogue. Here's the funny character. Like, you have to know what's right for your story. Like, some stories need a slower start because the world is so important. It's so immersive. You can't just like throw them in and like expect them to suddenly understand and care about these people. Because in earlier draft, I made that same mistake. I started way later, and a beta reader was like, you are writing as if we know who these characters are and we should all care about them. Like, I don't understand what's going on. I'm like, fair. And then I made the mistake of like giving you like everything. Like, here they are arriving at the convention. Here they are putting on their costume. And then they're just like, Mia, this is also a mystery. So like like they said, sometimes you have to feel out what it is you're trying to do, right? It's a humorous mystery, but at its heart, it was a mystery. And I had to find a way to weave those other things around it. So like, what kind of story are you trying to tell? What are the genre expectations you're trying to meet or subvert? Because obviously, you don't have to fit into a neat genre box all the time. But asking yourself, like, what's the point? Like, why here? Why does it have to be here? Like, what is kicking off in this scene that bookends and changes and really starts like the arc and the journey and the actual story?
Okay, I'm kind of working through my answer as I'm giving it right now, so bear with me. But oftentimes when it comes to beginnings, it's about establishing the status quo. And then once you get to the inciting incident, that is when your characters are put into a situation of adversity where change starts to occur. And in my experience, change is what people like to read about. And so for me personally, I think I'm pretty good at writing inciting incidences. And so how can I get to that point as soon as possible, whereas the status quo is just kind of supporting the inciting incident? And so if, in an early draft, if I started a week before the inciting incident, and then I realized, oh, well, the status quo is just there to set up the rest of the book. What if I can have the status quo start 3 days before the inciting incident? And then that allows readers to kind of become more quickly invested in the story.
That was a really big one for me, because I had really horrible beginnings when I first started writing. And what I quickly learned in drafting and working with community and mentors was, as I draft, the pacing is off. If the beginning isn't right, the pacing is off. So if there's a pacing problem in the book, like if you're not getting to your mystery quickly enough, or you are not getting to that meet cute quickly enough or too quickly, it's the beginning. Go back to the start. So for me, the test of, am I starting in the right place, is, are all the other pieces falling into place behind it? Because they will if you're starting in the right place.
All right, that was great. Someone once told me that if in the beginning you have a scene and someone asks you what's the point of this scene, and the only answer is the readers need to know this before we get to the story, like you need to cut that scene or you need to add something to that scene. So I try to ask myself, what's the point of this scene? And that helps me a lot. All right, Priya asked, a common trope in psych thrillers is selective memory loss. How do you feel about memory loss in science fiction?
I'll cover this one because I mean, it sort of touches close to home since one of my books deals with an epidemic, a pandemic of memory loss. So like thinking about sort of like, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can sort of treat that, thinking about SF. But if you're sort of thinking about memory loss on a more individual level, first and foremost, I think you should really research the medical backgrounds, the medical history of memory loss. Talk to, go to retirement homes, talk to doctors, talk to family members who have maybe known somebody with dementia or Alzheimer's and or other medical conditions that might engage with memory in some way. Because I think you also want to be responsible and representing memory loss in a way that is accurate and empathetic if you're talking about a particular sort of main character. If you're trying to do something that's perhaps a little bit more high premise with memory loss, like a worldwide epidemic of memory loss, I think you need to ask yourself, what that memory loss is maybe trying to do symbolically or thematically, because I think there's so much you can say about memory in terms of how history repeats itself, how we love our family, how we come to understandings with our environment. So for me, I'm highly interested in memory and cognition and consciousness. So if that's you, that's something that I personally would be excited by.
I would say I'm pretty iffy when it comes to memory loss. It just seems like one of those things where it's just really hard to do well. And with different critique partners that I've worked with, I just feel like it's just really hard to nail down. So, I mean, I've read stories where the memory loss was done well and I enjoyed the story, but more often than not, I'm not a huge fan of it.
All right. That was great answer, Sequoia. And I think Clay said that pretty much the same thing. Like if you do it, you have to do it well and you have to do it with purpose. All right. Anthony asks, what's your opinion on high concept versus low concept? And maybe one of you could real quick just kind of explain exactly what high concept is in case people are not sure. Michelle, you look like you're ready.
Of course, you're going to stick me out on that limb. I am not the person to look to for that definition between high concept and low concept, because I don't really adhere to it.
Someone else can jump in. Anyone? Does anyone?
Someone else can jump in on that.
Want to help define high concept?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. I'm not entirely sure what the differences are either.
I don't know if anyone is.
Because when I'm writing, I'm just writing the story I want to tell. I need to know like the general, what genre it fits in. But as far as like the nitty gritty when it comes to like high concept and low concept, I don't really pay attention to that stuff.
I mean, again, like don't quote me on this too hard because like, again, this is just something I remember reading a blog. I think it might be on like the Nelson Literary Agency, so you might be able to look there. But the way one of the agents described it just means like easy to pitch. Like if you're doing like within movies, you're like it's like oh my god, like someone said like the movie Toy Soldiers was Die Hard but in a high school. Like if you can do like that kind of thing, those are I think that's technically what like high concept was. But if you have like a quieter story that focuses more on like character development and things like that, I believe that's considered low concept because you don't have these like flashy like comp titles that you can throw around, right? And it doesn't always mean like because they pitch well when it's high concept, right? Like for my Pitchwars novel, it was like Veronica Mars meets the Power Rangers. So you see that and you're like, how does that even go together? Interesting, like it didn't go anywhere. But like it was high concept because I was able to put those two things that rather actually succinctly, described it. But like if it was like a quieter character drama, that's not really something I can just toss those kinds of titles around, I believe.
What complicates matters too is that you can certainly have a high concept novel that's also low concept. You can have that. You can have basically what's a literary novel that is housed with a high concept, which is sometimes you sort of see comments on Amazon or Goodreads that are kind of thrown for a loop because they were expecting that high concept novel, and then what they're getting is maybe something that's a little quieter, or vice versa.
Yeah. That's some great answers. I like that. All right, we'll move on to the next question. Ebony asks, are any of you taking women's fiction? Okay. So would a women's fiction book where the main character is emerging from a past life of abuse be a turn off?
I'm going to jump on that one really fast, and absolutely not. I have emerged from a life of abuse. So for me, absolutely, if it's done well, understand that there are triggers and that you have to treat it delicately and respectfully. But if you can do that, I think it has a very strong, it can be a very strong and very powerful and very moving story if done well. So no, I have no problem with that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Rochelle. And I think that you just have to be mindful of what's on your prospective mentors' please don't send me list. And we all have different and varying reasons why we have specific things that we would prefer you not send. And that sometimes can be triggers, and often it's very personal reasons. But for the right mentor, like Rochelle, that's going to be, the one of her, she's going to love that sub. So, yeah.
All right. Let's see. So Dell asked, for sci-fi mentors, what is your experience working with visually impaired or blind writers? How do you go about the not so visual writing style? Would you take such a mentee? I don't think we have any like purely sci-fi people here today, right? Sequoia, your wish list is pretty broad, I think. But if y'all want to answer just kind of like in general, not specifically for sci-fi, please go ahead.
I mean, I would absolutely take a mentee like that. I don't have a lot of experience with that. I mean, this is my first year mentoring. I've had CP partners and whatnot, but as far as like a mentorship role, I can't say that I've worked with that, but I would absolutely be willing to work with a mentee like that.
I'll chime in from editing experience. I have no problem working with diverse and any adaptive technology. Have had experience with that in the past. So whatever works, we find a way.
Yeah. All right. Christine asks, how quickly do mentors ask for a manuscript? And is that usually before an interview? So maybe actually, if we could just broaden this question, because this question comes up every time, and I love hearing the answers because they're always different. What is, or what do you plan to be if this is your first time, kind of your process in going through your inbox and making your decisions? What do you plan to do? And we can just have each of you kind of tell us.
All right, I'll jump in since I'm going around the clock. My plan, since this is my first time, is to review all of the submissions before making any requests, because I don't want to fall in love with something at the beginning and then fall in love with something else and then bombard myself with too many that I have to request on, because that would be what I would do. So I will read all submissions, then probably do questions, and then probably partial requests, and then full requests. So that's it.
Yeah, so the way Kelly and I do is you think I would remember after doing it for 2 years, but I can't remember if we wait till we finish all the submissions. But the way it has to be a yes from both of us, right? It can't just be, like if I see a no from Kelly, then it's a no because it's unfair, So all the yeses we request fulls just because, like, it's just easier that way. We do realize it builds a bit more, expectation, but it just makes it a little bit easier for us to kind of look at it as a whole. So we request fulls, and then we send a list of questions. Because one of the most important things that a lot of people don't is like every mentor or mentor team has a certain style. They have certain personalities. We have certain quirks, certain strengths and weaknesses. And, we have to make sure we are the right fit, not just for your manuscript, but for you as well. Right. So we need to know that we'll work well together. This is about 3 months. It can be very intense. It can be very hands-on. We need to make sure that you can handle being in constant contact with us, that we can handle being in, that kind of thing as well. Because so we want to make sure that we're a good fit, that we have that you're receptive to feedback and that kind of thing. So we send out all our yeses like pretty quickly. We look at the questions. If we don't fall in love immediately, we'll start looking at our strong maybes. But we don't like shotgun send out requests. Like we're not going to send out like 20 requests like all at once. Like we do try to temper expectations and make it manageable.
I'm also working with a co-mentor, my wife, Cole. We also are co-editors of a literary magazine. So we're used to working with each other. And again, I think echoing, Mia, if something's a no for somebody, it's kind of a no for both of us. We both have to feel, I think, pretty strongly about something. I think in Cole's past experiences, she says that varies in terms of, when she's sending out requests for partials or for fulls. For me, I think because of, just to keep things manageable, I think on both sides, we'd probably be, getting back to people throughout the process.
Yeah, I mean, it's more or less the same. I wouldn't want to make 30 or 40 requests and then realize I still have 150 submissions to get through. So I would love to get through all the initial submissions and then get an idea, okay, I have 4 or 5 weeks to pick a mentee. I need to, manage my time properly. So at that point, then I would decide how many requests I would make. And then as far as an interview process, I mean, it would be a written interview. I'm not going to be calling anyone up, but it's hard to say at this point. I'm kind of, as a first-time mentor, I'm kind of learning as I go.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I'm kind of learning as I go here too. I think I will most likely give everything a quick once over and see what really grabs my attention. If something grabs it straight off, then I'll probably go ahead and request it. But like Clay said, we have to kind of make sure that we don't request so many manuscripts that we get overwhelmed. If I get 150 subs, I can't request 150 subs. I don't think I can get through that many. I'm not a speed reader. And I know some mentors are, but I'm not. And then I think as far as what I request, if I request more from somebody, I'm just going to go ahead and ask for a full straight away. I think it just is going to streamline the process. That way, if I like what I'm reading, I can just keep going. I don't have to worry about getting back to you. And then, yeah, there will be questions when I ask for that. So things like, how do you like to receive feedback? And, what is your experience? And how long have you been writing? And I'm sure there will be plenty. But yeah, I mean, it's really going to have to grab me for me to request straight away. And if you don't get a request from me straight away, it doesn't mean I don't like your story. It's that I need to sit with it. I need to sit with the concept. So yeah, that's it.
All right. I love hearing everyone's process because like a lot of people who've worked with me know that I'm very like logical and very like I love my Excel sheets and everything is organized but for some reason whenever I was a mentor, like I'm just purely compulsive when it comes to my inbox. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, I look back and I'm like, who is that person who was just like randomly requesting things? And like, and then you start thinking about something at 3 a.m. and you get up or like you get on your phone and you like send a request. Like, what is wrong with you, Sarah? But yeah, so everyone does it very differently, of course. So I love to hear everyone else's. Okay. In terms of comps, what is the latest releases you think work best for queries? And she references a book that released on August 4th. Is that too soon to include in a query? I think it depends. Like, I used to read Slush, and I think it depends on the book. Like, this is a YA example, but like right now, Cemetery Boys just came out 2 weeks ago, but I don't think it's too soon to use that as a comp because it made such a big splash and everyone kind of knows what it is, even if they haven't read it yet. But if it's like one of those books that's going to be like a strong mid-list book that didn't make a big splash, it might be too soon. Any other thoughts?
I think you actually nailed it right there. If you're talking about a book that came out and just went on the scene and everybody's talking about it, then absolutely go ahead and use it. There's no such thing as too soon. But if it's a niche market or something that hasn't made that impact, you're likely going to be facing people who don't know what it is. And I'm not a huge fan of comps just for the sake of comps. They have to mean something. They have to be on point. So I would say if it's a great big book that everybody's talking about and it's a slam dunk comp, use it. Otherwise, skip it. But I don't think there is such thing as too soon if it's popular. So.
Yeah, for me personally, it will take me anywhere from, I'm a very, very slow reader, so it will take me 2 weeks to a month to get through. I mean, I read science fiction or fantasy, so those books tend to be a little longer. But if I'm, taking 2, 3, or 4 weeks to read a book, there's no way in hell I'm going to be keeping up on the latest books that are out. So like the one you said, for instance, I've never heard of it before. So using that as a comp for me is not gonna work. So it really just depends on from person to person. But like Rochelle said, I mean, comps, I wouldn't worry too much about comps. They're just there for reference, or so don't feel like they're a big deal.
All right, cool. I do think proportionally, prospective mentees do think about comps a lot more than mentors think about them whenever they're looking at the submissions. All right, so we have a lot of questions that are specifically for science fiction and fantasy mentors. So I'm actually going to skip some of those because we're getting so many of them, and like half of our mentors can't answer those questions today. So maybe we'll come back to them if we have time, but just a heads up. All right. I have a younger protagonist, fully realized in his trade at 16, 17. This is fantasy, and several POVs. I've been told because of my main character's age, I have to go to the YA direction. Is this true? And Veronica is looking to submit as adult.
I think that I know that there's that window in there that they say what is like 15 to 19 is generally YA. The age of your protagonist is 15 to 19. But for me, it's more about the themes that you're dealing with. If the themes in the book are very adult, then I would say you have an adult book. Just because the protagonist is young doesn't mean it has to be YA. Yeah,
I would agree. You got the Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
A lot of those protagonists are very, very young, but it's a very adult book. So it just really depends on the content of the book and like Tricia said, the themes.
Mm-hmm. The themes, the content, the style, the tone. I mean, like, I think the Flavia de Luce books by Ellen Bradley, I'm pretty sure the protagonist is like 12 years old, but it's not a children's book, right? So like, and sorry, my dogs are freaking me out right now. And you can have like an older protagonist with a younger voice. You can have a younger protagonist with older, right? Again, age is not the only way to classify your book. Because I had people who knew nothing about YA read my book and be like, this sounds young, why don't you make her a teenager? I'm like, because this is not a YA book, you obviously don't know what you're talking about. And people who are well versed in these things will be able to kind of tell. If you read enough in those age categories, you kind of get a feel for it, right? I read a ton of adults, but I also read kidlit. So I can kind of, it's one of those annoyingly hard to quantify things where when you read it, you kind of know. But if I had to give you this like checklist other than like tone, theme, you know, that like it's kind of evasive, and I'm very sorry about that. But absolutely, the age of the protagonist does not mean it has to be YA.
Yeah, there's not a lot of wiggle room in, say, the young adult genre. Generally, those protagonists need to be within that age range, but with adult, it's much more versatile.
Yeah, the inverse isn't necessarily true. And I think you hit it on the head. Like, as with almost anything, like the answer is to read widely in your chosen category. Rochelle, did you have something to add? Okay. Justina asks, how polished should a draft be before submitting to pitchwars?
I will hop in on that one. I think the problem there is that it's easy to say it should be X, Y, and Z, but your own ability to assess your own work is pretty limited. So I think it should be better than a rough draft, and not quite agent ready. If it's ready to query, then it's ready to query. So my answer to that is submit, really, because you may not know where your polish level is, and you may not be able to assess that. If you're still looking at pages that have fix this all over them and typos everywhere, you're probably not quite there. But anything beyond that, if you've got a complete story that starts at point A and goes to the end and has a complete character arc, plot arc, the narrative is there, I'd call it good.
Yeah, and to be
Yeah, I want to
honest,
jump on that,
I mean,
and just say that if you are, let's go ahead. Yeah, just if you're desiring community, if you want to be, if you want to, submit to pitchwars, and you feel like you could develop and grow as a writer from working with somebody one-on-one, submit, regardless of whether or not you think it's, A level, B+ level work, because as Rochelle said, you're not going to know that. So, I think you have nothing to lose by submitting it to pitchwars. And just to kind of give you a little bit of an anecdote here, I thought I was done when I got my agent, and little did I know that I would have 3 more years of editing with my agent, and now I'm editing with my editor, and she gave me like a 700 comment editorial letter, and I'm working on that now. So whatever you think, whenever you think you're done, you're really not, and that's just part of the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, part of it is, well, I mean, like, don't send us a first draft, please. Don't send me like your 500,000 word like NaNoWriMo book that you haven't cleaned up yet. But at the same time, this is a mentorship program. Like, it's expected to not be like ready to print, right? Because otherwise, what are we doing for 3 months? Like just kind of like hanging out on Google Chat. So what we look at is, I want you to get to a point where you think it's good, you want it to be better, but you don't quite know how to get there. And you feel like outside eyes, like maybe you have CPs, maybe you have beta readers, and they are like, something is missing and they can't quite pinpoint it. I feel like that's when, you definitely would want like a mentor or something like that. We're not looking for perfection. It would kind of like defeat the purpose. But we do, again, it's a short time. It's an intense time. So we have to reach this weird like middle ground where like, we know we can help you, and we know we can help you within this tight deadline. So again, like if we reject it, it's not because it's not great. Maybe we think it's pretty good and there's not much we can add to it. So like, please query away. Maybe it's like, oh man, this is excellent. And I really see the bones of this story, but this is not like a 2.5, 3 month project. And we're very sorry, but here's some feedback we can give. Well, I shouldn't say that because like we can't all give feedback. Again, who knows how many subs we're gonna get. But like if we request your full, there's a good, like we will give you feedback. But that's strictly requests. I cannot promise anything else. Kelly would murder me. So
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Mia, actually. I think that it should be as polished as you can make it, with the expectation that it's not perfect and somebody can help you with it to make it closer to perfect.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'll more or less say the same thing. From my point of view, if I have all of these submissions, I have no idea at what stage for you personally you are with your draft. So I'm going to default to it being that everyone has put their best foot forward with it. So if you submit a rough draft to me, I'm going to assume that's what you were able to come up with, because I have no idea. And like Mia said, this is a mentorship program. My intention is to find someone who has kind of hit a ceiling, and I want to provide them my insight to kind of help them get past that point. So if you feel like you haven't hit that ceiling with your draft, you should absolutely still submit, because you don't lose anything from submitting, but it would reduce your chances.
I just wanted to add, because Mia had mentioned a couple of reasons why, even though they liked it, they still might not be the right mentor for it. And sometimes I found, because I can tell where it needs improvement, but I'm not the right person to provide guidance on that. Because our mentors aren't they're not, long-term professional editors, and they don't know how to fix every problem. And so sometimes they just, for example, I wouldn't be able, if your problem is with like plot or character development, that would be something that I'm more likely to help with than something like internalization or something like that. And so every mentor has their strengths, and so they're definitely going to go for things that they think that they can help the most. All right, we're going to do this one last question, and then we're almost out of time. This went quickly. Hannah asks, I've read that starting a query with a question is considered tacky. What are your thoughts? Mia's got a big smile over there.
I mean, I'm not an agent, so I can't really give you an answer to that. If enough people say to stay away from it, in my opinion, why take the risk? But like I said, I'm not an agent, so I wouldn't feel comfortable advising you one way or the other.
I would have to say starting a query with a rhetorical question is one of those things that agents will go, don't do that. So you should know the rules, but you should also know when to break the rules, because there's a specific kind of rhetorical that they hate more than others. Like, what would you do if? That's probably you're gonna get an eye roll, I think, probably out of that. But if it's not really meant to be a question, but to illustrate a point, I think that's a rule that you can bend. But it's from what I've heard, it's a no-no.
I mean, like, the reason because again, like, I've done this since 2018, 2019. I've done a lot of query critiques and things like that. So it is things that you see it a lot. And so, when you see it happen so much and they're basically the same thing, it's just kind of like, and just like, it's like writing a scene. You have to, like, why do you think a question is the right way to start? Is there a very deliberate reason you're doing this? Or are you just like, ooh, like a question, like it'll draw them in. It's almost like interactive. Is it though? Is there a better way that you can word it? Is there a more dynamic way? Is there a more, like, going back to the person who said like their first line is really good, I wouldn't insert part of the manuscript, but make sure you show your voice. Like, what makes it good? Is it because like, is it funny? Is it like super dramatic? Is it like, does it set the tone really well? Well, then make sure that tone is in your query. Like, I just feel like there really are very few hard no's in writing, but if you can think of a better way, I would steer that way.
Yeah.
You should have a really strong reason to choose it.
Keena, I just want to let you know, I do see you trying to get in. And so you're just going to have to wait a couple minutes because we can only have 10 people in. So I emailed you about that, so you know, but I just wanted to say it in case you're watching, so you know that I see you. Yeah, I think that's the problem, is like it's done badly so much that people have a bad reaction to it. And the other part of it is a lot of people do think they are the exception when they're actually writing the exact example of what not to do, you know? And the problem is if the agent can look at that question and say no, or I don't care, or nothing, then that's the end. That's the end of your query, you know? Like, it's a classic like sales technique, like don't start on a no. So yeah. All right. So thank you, the 4 of you, 5 of you, so much for coming today and answering everyone's questions. If you could just close this out by, if you have a book or an event that you'd like to promote, this is your time for self-promotion, and also tell people where they can find you online. And I'm going to put your Twitter handles up right there. So we can just go around the circle with this one. So start with Rochelle.
I'm the quick and easy one. You can find me on Twitter easily, and you'll also find a link to my blog, but I'm Rochelle Karina everywhere. And other than that, I don't yet have a book to promote because I'm on submission. Yay. So I'll pass it off to Mia.
All right. So you can find me Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at MPM the Writer. You can also check out my website. It's my full name, www.miapmanansala.com. And again, I'm going to be that person because I spend a good amount of money on this phone cover, and I don't get physical art, so this is all I have. My debut, Arsenic and Adobo, comes out May 4, 2021.
Let's go with Sequoia.
Okay. As a are going this way? All right. So I pretty much live on Twitter. So at Sequoia is a good place. You'll find my website there, sequoianagamatsu.com. Again, my short story collection, Where We Go When All We Were Is Gone, is already out, and you can find links to that via the website. My novels won't be coming out for a while. The first one comes out in 2022, How High We Go in the Dark. I think there's already a Goodreads page for it, so you can add it very, very preemptively if you want. And I think that's about it. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Well, as far as book stuff is concerned, there's certain news that I would absolutely love to talk about, but I'm not allowed to, so we will just leave it at that. You can find me on Twitter at ClayHarmon2.
Wow, that was just short and sweet. I don't have the luxury of having all of my social media accounts have the same name. I wish I did, but apparently Trisha Lynn is more common than you would think. So Instagram is Trisha Lynn Writes, and Facebook is Trisha Lynn Author. And you can hit me in either one of those places. Again, like Kelly, Moonlight and Whiskey was my Pitchwars book. So feel free to pick it up. It actually just won an award for Bookseller's Best Erotic Romance. And I do have a new one coming out in December 21st. It's called Protective Instinct, and it's the first book in the Unlovables series, which is about rescue dogs and football players.
Nice. All right. Thank you again. You can find me on Twitter at Sarah_Nicolas. But I am locked out of my Twitter account thanks to a Twitter glitch. So I don't know when I'll be back. It's still there though. You can still follow me and at me. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And hopefully we'll see you probably on Twitter in the next coming days. And I'm going to go ahead and make myself full screen. We'll bring on our next round of mentors. All right, I'm switching everyone out now. All right, cool. So Keena, you can come in now if you're watching. All right, so I'm going to have each of the mentors introduce themselves. So if y'all could just kind of talk about what you write. Whenever you see yourself on the screen, talk about what you write, if you have any books published, and also your pitchwars history. And so we'll go ahead and start with Marianne.
Hi, I'm Marianne Marlowe, and I write contemporary romance and romantic comedy under both the name Marianne Marlowe, and I have Lorelei Parker, Crushing It. This came out in July, and I have a book that just came out in September called Kind of a Big Deal. Which way does this camera? That way. And let's see, I was a mentee in 2014, and then I've been a mentor every so the 5 years after that. This is my 6th year being a mentor.
All right, and next is Annette.
Hi, I'm Annette Christie. I write YA contemporary and women's fiction. I co-mentor with Sonia Hartle, and I was her mentee in 2016, and we've been co-mentoring ever since. And I have a book that I wrote and narrated available on Audible Originals. It's called Love Lessons, and my women's fiction debut is coming out in June 2021 with Little Brown.
All right, and Leslie.
Hi, I'm Leslie. I write as El Penelope. I write fantasy and paranormal romance. My Earthsinger Chronicles is my fantasy series, and this is the 3rd book. The last one that came out last month is Cry of Metal and Bone. And I also have a paranormal romance series or 2 floating around. This is my 1st year as a Pitchwars mentor, and I'm a co-mentor with Denny S. Bryce.
All right, Ian.
Hi, I'm Ian Barnes. I do not have any books out yet. I was a Pitchwars mentee in 2016 with Annette, and then again in 2017, and I have been mentoring since 2018. And I think I forgot to say that I write fantasy. Pretty much that's about it.
And I forgot to say happy birthday. Happy birthday, Sarah.
Oh, yeah. Happy birthday, Sarah.
Hi everyone, I'm Keena Roberts. I write adult fantasy and sci-fi. My first book came out last year, and I just finished a first draft of a second one that I'm working on with my agent right now. My pronouns are she, her. I forgot to say that at the beginning. And this is my 2nd year mentoring for Pitchwars. I mentored last year and now this year too.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for the birthday wishes. We are at the part in the comments where Kelly just said, we need a dead body. And I'm sure it was in context, but
I do not volunteer. I volunteer Ian.
But that gives you an idea of where we are in the timestamp in the comments. We're answering questions from 7:20 right now. So just a heads up on that. And we have plenty of questions, so we're going to dive right in. Hi, romance mentors. I have a triangle, and my CPs seem to think the other love interest is more interesting than the one whom the MC ends up with. Should I drop some of the other love interest scenes?
Wow. Ooh, yeah.
I actually, my debut has a love triangle in it, and so I have experience with this because it was like, do I make that other option really appealing or less appealing, because you still want readers to root for your main characters to get together in the end. But I think that it's really fun if you keep playing with those scales a little bit. So I think as long as by the end we are rooting for the couple that gets together to get together, I don't think you necessarily have to cut any of those scenes. I think maybe what you need to do is amp up who they end up with, amp up those scenes a little bit.
And I think that it's a character question, really. Like, I agree, you might not have to cut scenes, but what are the qualities of this person that is attracting the reader more than the actual love interest you want them to end up with? And is it obvious by like 70% or so that their personalities don't match up or their values don't match up? Like, something has to not match up with the wrong person as the main character in the triangle, like the pivot person or whatever, as they grow and change. So look at the character and the relationship.
And this is also going to be a reader-specific response a lot of times. Some readers really don't want to feel that. There's a pull on the love triangle. They don't want the love triangle to be there. They want to like have the focus be as hard as possible on the main person. But some people like to see that kind of like, you want to have teams. I've read that in Europe, they really like teams. Like, so the more the love triangle you have in there, the better, because then you've got these competing interests. But yeah, it does become an issue though if you're like all of your readers are all rooting for the other guy. So you might want to take a look at making sure that you're peppering in enough with the love interest to make him the lovable one.
All right. How do you feel about prologues, especially if they're being used as a one-page tool to give some context, foreshadowing to where the main character is headed?
I like prologues and epilogues, but they have to be done very well, and it's tricky to make them. It's tricky to do them well. Like most of the time, I'd say about a good 90-95% of the prologues I've seen in pitchwars should have simply just been called Chapter 1. Like, I think if you want to see an author that does prologues well, I would look at like a lot of what Brandon Sanderson writes as far as fantasy goes, because he sets up a lot of the world building and inciting events that precipitate. It's basically like events that have ripples that then play out into the main plot, but it's not a good way to slot it in any other way other than like a backstory info dump. But by and large, most prologues, like shorter is better, but again, why is it just not Chapter 1? Like, you need to have a very good reason.
Yeah, and actually, Ian and I were talking about this on the Sci-Fi Fantasy chat last night, that really what you need to think about is your reader is coming in completely new to your world, and where do you want them to be on page 1? And if it's not in the character's head that you want them to be, then it can be really jarring for them to get in someone's head and then abruptly get out of someone's head, and you run the risk of losing them. So I think for the prologue, you really need to ask, is that going to happen? And if it is, then you might be better off starting a little bit further along so that your reader doesn't get confused about what's happening.
And I just wanted to add that there's a kind of a myth that editors and agents hate prologues. I only have prologues in my book because my editor asked me to add a prologue. So I agree with everyone else. They have to be necessary, but don't think that automatically they're going to be like a death knell. Just they have to be done well. And I'm not sure from the question that was, it depends on every case, but you really have to just think about it.
I don't know that there's really a pertinent question for romance. We don't get a lot of prologues.
All right. Oh, no problem, Keena. That's the beauty of StreamYard, is if you get kicked out, you can just come right back.
Well, it just is like, hi, you're gone. I'm like, okay.
All right. So Christine asked, is it okay if the query letter goes slightly beyond 1 page?
So we actually just got this one on Twitter too, and Sonia was kind enough to answer. The form is set up to go a couple lines. Well, Sarah, you would probably better answering this anyway. The form will take a couple lines longer than 1 page. Like the person asking said that they had a content warning at the beginning that was making it run a little long. And Sonia said like a couple lines is fine. But, don't go on too much longer than that.
All right. And also, I will say, because the synopsis is the only thing that we actually give a limit for, and that does need to be 1 page. It does need to be 1 page, 1-inch margins, regular formatting, like don't do anything funky with it. That's the only thing we really have a hard limit on. And that's because if we say, oh no, one extra line is okay, and then someone comes along and is like, oh, what about 2 lines? And then someone comes along, what about 3 lines? And the next thing you know, they're like, well, what about half a page? That's not much. And so it just keeps going from there. So yes, 1 page for the synopsis. All right. Sorry. There's like a lot of chatter in the chat at this point, so it's hard to find the questions. All right. There's like a lot of jokes. Okay. Okay, here's a good question. Terry asked, do you have a favorite writer's homework that you would give to a mentee? And do you have one you do with your own writing?
I'll jump in. One thing I always do after I finish writing a book is I reverse engineer it into a spreadsheet so I can see all of the scenes and how they lay out. And every year I've had my mentees do the same thing so they can see how the structure of their book lays out and where the arcs are and where the beats are. And we can then start from there. Usually by the time they're done with it, they already have ideas about where I'm going to go next because it becomes really clear.
Yeah, I can't remember which craft book this comes from, but I like the exercise where it's similar to the reverse outline where you go through and you write each chapter on an index card and you have to say 2 or 3 important things that happen in the chapter. And if there aren't 2 or 3 important things, then you've got a problem with the chapter.
I'm a big fan of spreadsheets too. And also, if there's like a plot problem, reverse plotting. So starting at the end of the story and then going backwards and saying what cause, and finding the cause and effect for each thing that happens to make sure that it's motivated well. That can be really helpful when you're dealing with something that's tricky. So I think homework would kind of depend on the specific situation and the problem that a person was having.
All right. And Nicole asks, what's your game plan for helping your mentee tackle revisions?
Usually a lot of brainstorming at first. Like I go through the edit letter, I'll give it to them, I'll let them absorb it. I've had mentees who wanted to wait a couple of days. I had a mentee who wanted to go an hour after I sent it. And so we just ended up talking, basically just working through like the things that like felt like it was working, felt like it wasn't working, ways to fix it. And then kind of, I'm a big fan of not making any rash changes to anything. Like I like letting it sit for a little while as you think about it. So even with the one where we talked after an hour, it was still like, don't touch this for at least a day, at least let it sink in and figure out a plan of attack. And ended up having more brainstorming sessions. It just kind of goes from there.
Yeah, I mean, so last year, so I'm a big believer in having this very open dialogue with my mentee and making sure that any changes that we talk about are things that last year she was completely on board with and supportive with. And we discussed some of her hard no's before we got started, just to make sure that we weren't going to touch the elements that were really important to her. But we started with doing a Save the Cat. We started with doing a spreadsheet. Even though the book was already in good shape plot-wise, it still helps to kind of make sure that those beats are where you want them. And then we talked about the issues that were challenging. And then while I wrote my edit letter or finalized it based on that conversation, I had her read a couple of books, which she was game enough to do, of authors who did really well, some of the things that she was struggling with, just so that we could then talk about those and try to get some inspiration from people who did it well and then incorporate that into our process.
And I think it's mentee dependent too. You know, Sonia and I have had mentees who were really independent and wanted to just charge forward and go and do the work and kind of figure it out for themselves. And then we've had mentees who really wanted to sit and brainstorm with us significantly before starting on those revisions. So it's dependent upon the person.
And one other thing I like to do is have a discussion about the characters and get into what their motivations and fears are, and to really dive into the kinds of things that are going to drive conflict.
Yeah, it also depends on the manuscript too, because Lee had mentioned just early in the comments when I had her take out the first 60 pages of her manuscript. So she had to rewrite like a third of her book before we could even really talk about anything else. So yeah, it depends on the process. All right, Aaron asked, is a novel that takes place in 1950s a historical novel in your opinion? I think we're all firm yes, right? Yeah, I think the definitions start getting murky when we're talking about like the 90s and 2000.
But yeah, I think that genre-wise, 1950s is right the beginning of historical, technically, something like that.
All right. Must the main character's age be clearly stated in a query letter? I know for a young adult, this is a definite yes, unless there's a reason why it's withheld. But I don't know the answer for adults, so go ahead.
No, not for
No,
me.
I don't think so.
Only if it has an
No,
impact on the plot, I'd say.
Yeah, unless there's a specific reason, you don't need it for adult.
All right. Anthony asks, where do you sit on non-traditional book formats? For example, Flowers for Algernon.
Good book.
I like them.
Yeah, as long as it works for the story you're trying to tell. Some books work really well in that format, but it has to have a reason, not just, an untraditional format for the sake of it. It would really need to be important for the book itself. And that's completely fine and even very interesting, but it does have to fit.
Yeah, I think it depends on genre and like marketability, because some things, whenever you're comping to something old, it's going to be a little bit difficult in terms of like modern audiences and modern publishers and what they're looking for. But there's still out of the box things that come out that really take the publishing world by storm. So I'd say try it.
Yeah, I think about Daisy Jones and the Six and how it was totally different than anything that I had read, and I quickly became obsessed with it, and everybody I knew became obsessed with it. So it can definitely work and be exciting.
All right. Asia asks, so what story quality are you looking for? What if the story goes slow in the middle, or maybe a character arc isn't fully realized? Are those points off, or do you just see it as something to work on?
Just something to work on. I mean, every book is going to have stuff that it needs to be worked on. And if those are the things, then those are the things. But, that could just be it for that particular book. And that's something you would talk about and say, hey, these are the parts that I'd really like help on. But I think very few things are a deal breaker. Every book has structural or voice issues, and that's what we're here to help with.
Yeah, I'll just build on that and say, if your book was perfect, you wouldn't be entering in pitch wars.
We were talking about comps earlier, and so I think this is related to that question, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it. My comps are pretty old, like 2000 to 2010. Is that too old?
I don't know if that's too old. If they're spot on, then like they really tell you what this book is, then go for it. But part of the work of a comp is to show that you know your market and that you're reading what's current. So you want to take that in mind as well. But half of the job of the comp is also to give me an instant idea of what your book is. So if they're perfectly accurate, then sure.
And comps are something that we've helped mentees with before as they craft their queries, as they get ready to write to agents and stuff. So I think it's okay.
All right. Ebony had asked, if there's a question that's kind of like a rules question, I usually just answer it and then we move on so we can get to as many questions as possible. So if there's a pit mat during the pitch wars process, is it better to not participate or does it matter? And so the pit mat is during the mentoring period. And so our mentors, we ask you not to query during the mentoring period. And so PitMad would count as querying, and so you wouldn't be able to do that if you were chosen as a mentee. If you're not chosen as a mentee, of course, you're more than welcome to do it. All right. Sorry, my screen jumped a little bit. Okay, Terry asked, what elements of craft do you enjoy working on the most with a mentee's manuscript? What are your strengths?
This is going to pop up a lot, I think, on the mentors' wish lists. Why should you sub to me? What am I good at? Speaking for myself, plotting and pacing and description are things that I'm really good at. So if those are issues where your book needs some help, then that's definitely areas that I can help with. And, everyone likes doing the stuff they're good at. So those are things I enjoy helping with.
I'll go. I really like doing world building. I really enjoy picking apart pacing, and I like working on action scenes. So you probably see the kinds of books I enjoy. But yeah, no, those are pretty much it. I'm weird, and despite doing line editing as a day job. I really like doing line editing. So I like picking apart sentences to make them as interesting and unique and flow as well as they possibly can.
For me, I enjoy plotting and structure and world building, and then like romance relationships as well.
Yeah, I really like troubleshooting plot issues and brainstorming and collaborating that way. I also really love dialogue and diving into relationships between characters.
I'm going to cop to not doing the world building so well. So I usually say, sorry, if you got world building issues, that's not going to be for me. But I like dealing with plot, character arcs, chemistry, building up the steam if you want to, and you know, looking really at like making sure the black moment, the conflicts come to a head really as intensely as possible.
All right. Chris had asked, can someone please explain what the agent showcase entails? So it's for the mentors who are chosen after the end of their mentoring period. If they think they are ready to go in the agent showcase, then a short pitch in the first page goes up on our website at a specific time, and agents can request. And sometimes they request full, sometimes 50 pages, sometimes 100 pages, whatever it is. And so it's like the end, it's kind of like the icing on the cake. It's like the celebration part of it. But then of course, some books don't pitch well in 30-word pitches. And so we still encourage people to query afterwards as well. All right, so there's a lot of chatter, so I have to scroll a while for the next question. Okay, do we have any sci-fi writers? Anyone who knows the sci-fi market? Keena? Okay.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot.
Jimmy's been asking a lot of sci-fi questions today, but we haven't had a lot of sci-fi people on the screen. What do you personally classify as hard sci-fi versus softer sci-fi and military sci-fi?
Can you put the question back up?
Yeah, sorry.
For me, hard sci-fi would be sci-fi that's very, very built around a scientific system or a kind of tech that's existing in this world. And if that, you know, the story is sort of built around the existence of this very technical stuff. Softer sci-fi would be a more of a character plot-driven stuff that happens around the tech. And then military sci-fi would be mostly about sort of space battles with characters in it. But I would say that that is just what I would perceive it as. And I think there's a lot of bleed between those categories. Ian, got any thoughts?
You'll look for hats.
That might be a Mike question. But
yeah, I think Mike actually answered it kind of in the comments as well. So
yeah.
Yeah, if you dig through Mike's Ask Mentor hashtag recently, I almost positively answered this either today or last night.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not the right person for this. I'm not even taking science fiction this year because I don't read enough of it lately. I pretty much just stick with fantasy.
Yeah, to me, that's where they would go. So something like Unconquerable Sun would mean softer sci-fi, and that's the most recent book I can read that I think of. But to me, that's sort of mostly where the lines would fall.
All right, great. Laura asked this question before, but she has learned, aside from your own mentees, what is your favorite book to come out of pitchwars?
I just read The Roommate, which was excellent, by Rosie Danon. A really good book.
That's just what I was going to say too.
Yeah.
It's really, really cute.
Something to talk about would be another one I really like. I read a lot of romance too, so that's a great one.
I like
Uh-oh.
Mike Mamay's Planet Side. Well, I could hype up his book. It was good. I enjoyed it, and that was his pitchwars book. I also liked from Annette and I's 2016 class, Jen DeLuca's Well Played.
Oh yeah.
Wait, no. Well Met was the first one. Well Played is the one that just came out. Never mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think either one of those were her pitchwars book, however, but she did come out of pitchwars.
Oh, Helen Huang's book.
Yeah.
Oh,
that was what I was going to say.
I love that book forever. Yeah.
Yeah. Helen Huang and I really enjoyed Baby Teeth, even though it's like not my normal kind of book.
Kelly
that was-
Cares too.
Oh, Kelly's was really good too. Yeah, Hollywood Homicide. I've read so many. I feel like I can't even remember whose pitchwars anymore.
I know, right?
But yeah, there are a lot of good ones. All right. So Leah asks, if you have to choose another mentor to co-write a book with, who do you choose and why? And they cannot be your co-mentor. Annette, I know you were going to say.
I had my answer ready. Give me a minute.
I have my answer, but it's gonna come off as funny. It's Marianne Marlowe.
Aw.
Because she's good at a lot of things that I'm not super good at, and I would love to learn how to do those things better. And she's awesome, so that's my pick.
Well, my answer is obviously Keena Roberts because she's fantastic in everything she does.
Oh my gosh, I'm blushing.
Okay, I got my answer. I'm going to go with Rochelle Lynne, partially because I just want to do the research with her where I get to go and eat all the food. And plus she writes gorgeous books and I could learn a lot from her.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, Rosie would be great. Mm-hmm. We talk all the time about food. We're both foodies, so
nice.
All right. I would probably pick Keena, honestly. Like, Keena sometimes, I message Keena sometimes with ideas, and she's just like, it's total a yes and moment, you know, like an improv where she's like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And
yeah,
so
but it's more like make it more extreme and weird. And then,
which is great.
It's like weird, but.
Yeah, make it extra. That's my brand.
How long would the ideal epitaph at the beginning of a chapter run? Are these turnoffs for you?
I think that they mean epigraph. And I do my whole series. Another thing that my editor asked me to do is add epigraphs to the chapters, interestingly enough. And so all of the books in my fantasy series have them. Ideal length, there's not an ideal length. It depends on what they're for. Like, it shouldn't be a page, probably, but something short and that's relevant thematically, ideally, or it serves whatever purpose that you're having them serve.
Yeah, I mean, in Sean McGuire's Middle Game, there's basically a book written as the beginning parts of each chapter, which was then subsequently published as another book. So those are long, but it really works for the story. So it sort of depends.
I got nothing.
All right. Maddie asks, how young is too young for the main character's age in an adult novel? And I will say we're almost through with the questions that have been asked so far. So if you have a question that was asked earlier that you want to get this round of mentors to answer, or if you have another question, feel free to go ahead and drop that now.
I'd say 18. But if they need to be 18, then that's probably on the line.
I think it does depend on the book, because like something like Ender's Game is technically an adult novel, and the main character was like 11. You've got room. I mean, it depends on what you're doing with the characters. So generally, yeah, they're 18. But if you have some special reason why there's a child as the protagonist, then in an adult novel, it's otherwise, having adult themes and everything, you could pull that off.
I'm going to ask you don't do that for a romance novel.
All right. Which of the materials do you read first? Does the synopsis shape how you read the first chapter, or do you read the synopsis after the pages to see where it's headed?
Am I allowed to say that I don't usually read the synopsis at all?
I don't either.
I may read it if I really want to know something, but I don't read them.
No, I might glance at the query first if I'm in the mood, but usually I'll read the pages first. If I like the pages, I'll go and read the query just to get an idea of it. The only time I ever read the synopsis is if I've requested it and I get beyond 50 pages.
I always start with the query as well, and then the pages, and then I'll go to the synopsis. But I'm almost positive Sonia reads the synopsis first because she likes to see if the plot beats are there and what's happening.
After my second year of mentoring, I got 80 pages into a book, and it like changed genres, changed stories, changed everything. So ever since then, I always read synopsis after the first chapter, but before I read more, because I just don't want to spend 80 pages with something that changes that rapidly, that becomes something entirely different. All right. Oh, that question was asked twice, basically, in a span of a couple minutes. Lodestar asked, "What is your favorite part of the pitchwars?" What?
Ian's cats. Which one is that?
We're just gonna take a little cat break. Everyone, hold on.
Oh, this is Calder. He's the 5-month-old kitten.
Oh, I love him.
Yeah, he just lost his balls the other day, so he's a little.
Oh, bless his heart.
Oh, okay. What is your favorite part of the pitchwars season or process, aside from seeing Ian's cat on the chat?
I mean, I honestly love going through submissions. It's so unbelievable to me what people can come up with. It's so creative. I'm just impressed. And, I've only done this for 1 year before this, but reading a book and thinking this is really special is a pretty exciting moment. And the fact that I'm able to, make someone feel good about something that they've written and really tell them how much I love it and make them all excited about it is a pretty awesome thing. But I'm also the person who likes giving presents at Christmas. So this is like really my thing. And I love being able to call my mentee and saying, I adore your book. You're incredibly talented. I can't wait to make this better with you.
Yeah, that answer.
I like the part, and I mean, we've mentored YA in the past, which can get a lot more competitive than adults, I understand. So we've had some close calls where we've nearly lost the books we've really fallen in love with. And so that moment when you know you've got it and you get to finally write back your mentee and say, hey, we chose you. We can't wait to work on this book. This is why we love it. That to me is the best part.
I really love going through the submissions for the same reason Keena does. I love seeing all of the different, all the creativity that's out there. But I also like getting to know the mentors better as we go through the submissions, because we tend to get, we talk a lot with each other about them. So it's a good opportunity for us to like network with each other better. And then I also really love when I'm starting to narrow it down and I can start talking to the different people that have applied to me, so I can get to know them. And even if I don't end up picking them, I can build relationships with people that I might like, other people that I still communicate with, and I read their books when they come out later that I didn't end up mentoring. And it's just really a great way to get to know people. And then, yeah, bam, when you get to actually tell somebody that you're going to mentor them, and then you cross your fingers they're not like sad or something. And then, yeah, it's just the whole process is really, from beginning to end, is just, there's something about every step that I really like.
I'll add in one other thing that I really like is when I get the first round of revisions back, because with every mentee I've had, they've always done an amazing job, and it's just really, I'm trying to think of the right word, but it's just really interesting seeing how these changes get implemented and how the book kind of, I don't know, sheds its cocoon and becomes the butterfly.
It's true.
All right, we're going to get controversial now. Not really. What is one piece of writing advice you don't agree with?
I like adverbs.
Yeah.
Me too. Adverbs can be very helpful.
She said helpfully.
Yeah, right.
My answer to this question is always write every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
That sucks.
I mean, aside from being ableist, it's just like, it doesn't work for some people.
No. Yeah. Yep. Now that I think about that, it's definitely the one I hate the most.
All right. Anybody else? I think all writing advice has its place, but I also think sometimes people will phrase it as like, I do it this way, so you have to do it this way or you're wrong. And I think that's where the trouble lies.
I don't like the words always and never.
Mm-hmm. I have a friend, I mentioned this before, Lucian Diver. She's a literary agent. She's an author and she lives next to me. And we do a lot of in-person panels before coronavirus. And I love being on writing process panels with her because everything we did was exactly opposite. And so it would just be a back and forth of us being like, well, I do this and I do this. She's like, I only write in the morning. I'm like, I only write at night. It was like, so it was great. All right. Emily had asked, this has been asked by a couple people from an earlier question. How do you feel about characters with memory issues such as memory loss, selective memory, that kind of thing?
I think that's because Denny, my co-mentor, is very against amnesia plots. That's going to be on our no list. Personally, it can work. I think amnesia is a difficult thing to pull off, but so people have very strong opinions about amnesia plots.
I think it could be interesting. Go ahead.
No, I don't have a problem with it. I haven't read a lot of books with that, so I don't know that I would be able to help mentor it well. And I think that it certainly could be interesting, but again, I keep coming back to if it fits the story you're trying to tell, then it's the right way to do it. But in general, as with many things we've said, that if it doesn't fit the story, then it's just adding a level of complication that could be overly confusing. But if it's right, then yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I don't really I've never come across that in a romance novel, and I'm thinking about it now, and I'm thinking that would be like a really convenient way to get out of stuff. So I don't know, it would have to be really handled very well for it to work, I think.
Yeah, I think like with any element, as long as it's done well, you could probably get away with it.
And I do want to mention Sequoia gave a beautiful answer earlier. So if you didn't catch that, make sure you go back and watch that from the first hour. So Jemmy had asked, this is another question I'll just answer real quick and we'll move on. When a partial is asked for, what does that mean? They don't actually ask for a partial. What they'll ask for is 50 pages or 100 pages. So they'll tell you exactly what that means. So you don't have to worry about trying to figure that out. Liv asks, does the current market make a difference in what you will ultimately choose to mentor?
No.
Mm-mm.
Maybe
I think it might make a difference in terms of just preference and taste. Like if you're writing an epistolary novel, there have been examples of those working recently, but yeah, it just might be okay if it feels classic. And that's a personal preference of styles. I love reading Jane Austen, but if you're writing in that style right now, I might have a harder time with it than when I actually go back to those writers. So things like that in terms of just style and things that are, just current versus non-current.
And on the other extreme, if something's like the market feels saturated with something, you might not want to go with something that feels overdone.
Yeah, and I think it was 2015 or 2016, I had a submission that was a dystopian, YA dystopian. That was great, but literally no one would touch dystopians at that point. And so it's do I want to spend 2 months at the time working on a book that I just know just has such a very, very small chance in the market? And I could tell the writer was very talented. And so I even reached out to them and I told them what I thought, and I thought that they were a great writer, and I asked them what else they were working on and that kind of stuff. So sometimes it does. And I also had multiple other books that I also thought were great. So, so you have to make that decision somehow. If a book experiments with form, would you want that noted in the query?
I would say yes, that's helpful so we know what we're getting into.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think so.
I guess I'll be the voice of dissent and say no. Honestly, it would really depend on, I guess it would depend on like how you're experimenting with it. Like if you're writing it in one word sentence fragments, I don't know how you could get that across in a query, but it would be very evident on your first page.
I just think a small note at the end of the query like this novel is told in verse or in epistolary format or whatever. But I mean, if it's Ian's example, then yeah, surprise me with that.
Like this novel is told in Pig Latin.
I think the answer is it doesn't matter. go with your gut.
I mean, that's not going to be a deal breaker for any of us, I don't think.
Right.
Anthony asked, do you prefer character-driven or plot-driven novels?
It depends, but I usually go toward character-driven novels, because even if you're in an epic fantasy sci-fi situation, if you don't have people with real hearts and motivations in it, or humanoid beings of whatever kind, then it needs to have some kind of emotional heft behind it to me. But again, it all depends.
I am pulled towards character driven entirely, and there needs to be a plot there to hold it together. But if I can see the bones of the book, it kind of pulls me out. I'd rather be feeling like I'm being led along by the inherent choices, organic choices of the characters.
Yeah, I'm drawn towards character as well. Although I do like a good high concept novel, but with that high concept, I want to see it rooted in someone I want to spend a lot of time with.
Yeah, they're so linked. It's almost a false dichotomy. Like people talk about character-driven versus plot-driven, but I mean, all the best things have both equally meshed together, and that's really what you're looking for.
That's a way better answer. Listen to that.
Yeah, I'll take that one too.
That's what I was gonna say. Every time this question comes up, I feel like it's a trick question. It's like both.
Right.
Like, why do you have to choose? All right. Rebecca asked an interesting question. Is there a genre you don't currently write that you'd like to take a stab at in the future?
Yeah, I'd love to write a romance. I read a lot of it. I really respect people who write romance. I would love to try and write one. And actually, there's a mentee who wasn't in my genre or anything last year who became friends, and she's now at my agency. And we're like, yeah, let's write a romance. And we're talking about it. I mean, who knows if it'll happen? I hope it will. But I would love to try and do that someday.
I'd really like to write fantasy. I read it, I love it, and I've tried and I can't because I don't know why, but I just can't do it. And
you mentor me, and I'll mentor you.
That's exactly right. Yes, yeah. We're a total team. Yeah,
completely.
Fantasy romance right here.
Love it.
I'd like to try a mystery. I've tried I dabbled in a novella that's a mystery, but yeah, I would love to, like a full length mystery. I don't know when, if ever.
One of these days, I'm going to write a space opera.
Yeah, with cats.
I recently read Sonia's book that's coming out soon, which is a vampire novel, and I'm like, hot damn, I want to write some paranormal now, so that would be my choice.
I was just thinking on a walk the other day, I would really like to write a really juicy Southern Gothic, which... Like, if you know my writing at all, I write very commercial YA, so it's very, very different. But I do love it. I just don't know if I could ever pull it off, but maybe one day. Nicole asks, if you think a sub could use one of your books as a comp, a similar plot point or world building or such, would you be hesitant about picking that submission?
I'm only hesitant if it's close to something I'm working on currently, but if it's something I've already written, that wouldn't bother me, I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah, same answer, basically.
I think that's how most mentors feel, honestly. Oh gosh, it all jumped again. Sorry, give me 1 second to find it all.
Ian, bring the cat back.
I need a distraction. All right. Would you pick a mentee who has submitted to you before?
I have.
I have to. Mm-hmm.
Totally. No problem.
Definitely.
Yep. I would definitely consider that. I actually requested the same book 2 years in a row because I was really impressed buy the revision that the author had done, you can actually go. I didn't end up pick her, but I'm going to pump her book because it's really good. It's Jen Carner. She wrote a very supernatural-esque urban fantasy that is coming out, I think, sometime next year.
Yeah, I want to add that the book that I ended up picking had gone through a huge overhaul and they'd taken my notes that I'd given her and she'd rewritten it, and it was a different book, and it was I could still see work to do in it, or else I wouldn't have picked it, but definitely.
The one that, so my mentee when I was co-mentors with Lee was an author had submitted to me before when I was solo mentoring a different book. And she was actually considering not submitting to me because I hadn't requested or anything. So she's like, she must just not like my writing or whatever. And we had on our wish list something like, I can't remember the exact wording, but it was like, if you have this meets this and you don't submit it to me, I will die and haunt you. Or something like that. I will die from disappointment and haunt you. And so she submitted to us, and that ended up being our mentee that year. She said I was intimidating. I don't get that. I'm not intimidating. I am intimidating. Sorry. Rebecca asks, what is your comfort book?
Oh, that's a good question.
I've read The Royal We about 6 or 7 times, and anytime I'm in a bad headspace, I just open that baby right back up.
I'm looking at my bookshelf. There's like a special section in my bookshelf for like books that I will hold on forever. So hold on a second.
I reread The Sea of Tranquility by Kachi Malay. And she never wrote another book, but it's like a fabulous YA book. That's one of my favorites ever. And then Namesake by Kate Stradling, which is an indie fantasy, which is another one of my favorite books. And I just pick them up and relive them.
Yeah, I'm going to go with When Women Were Warriors by Catherine M. Wilson. It's not a very well-known trilogy, but it is absolutely beautiful. And it's a slow burn fantasy romance over 3 books, and it's just beautiful. And every time I think I want to go somewhere beautiful, I read those books, and they're just fantastic.
This is going to be off-brand, but I've been reading Game of Thrones since it came out, and I reread them entirely when the new book comes out every 17 years. I really, really like them.
Yeah, I used to reread books all the time, like every time, like in the 90s, every time Terry Brooks put out a new fantasy, I ended up rereading everything that came before it, before that one came out. And when Jim Butcher would put out a new Dresden Files, I would reread. I think I've reread the first 5 books in that series about 6 times. But over the last several years, there's just so many new, interesting books out that I stopped rereading. Well, if I'm going to reread anything, it's going to be Gideon the Ninth.
Oh, yeah.
My computer is on my copy, otherwise I'd hold it up. But yep.
I'm not a huge rereader. All right. Oh, how do you feel about unreliable narrators?
I love them.
I love them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My Pitchwars 17 book had an unreliable narrator, and it's just a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
It would be a difficult thing to do in romance, huh, Marianne?
Well, yeah, but you could have some people that are like, your character. I mean, they can come across differently in their headspace than they actually do in to the people around them.
Actually, one of my favorite books is a romance with an unreliable narrator, 32 Candles by Ernesta T. Carter. It's amazing what she does in that book. Like, you're just jaw-dropping.
Lodestar asks, if your book has many facets of own voices within it, would you list the list of them or pick a select few for the query?
Drop it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, okay. That's a good question. Magic systems can be tricky. What is an example of a solid magic system for you?
Name of the Wind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any other ideas?
Anne, are you muted? Because he was talking.
I am muted. Yes. Sorry about
He
that.
just said some really brilliant things.
I know,
that we all
yeah.
missed him.
I did, and it's gone now. Now it's just going to be.
Repeat.
But no, like Patrick Rothfuss writes really good stuff. I would say Brandon Sanderson is kind of my go-to example for anything very intricate, very detailed. I don't know if it's necessarily as detailed, but like Victoria Schwab's stuff with like Darker Shade of Magic is really just gripping.
Yeah, my mind is completely blank. But it depends. Like, I love magic systems, but I like soft magic and hard magic too. And so you don't really think about soft magic systems when you talk about them. But I'm not going to be able to think of anything right now. I'll have to tweet it later.
I will say the magic system in Leslie's book is very beautiful. I love the way that it's done.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Is science fantasy an official genre that you can put in your query? Yes. In the drop-down list for the Pitchwars submission form, it will be under science fiction, and that's just because that's the way it is. There's really no. It was either going to be under science fiction or under fantasy, so it's under science fiction. Just FYI. But
Should have been fantasy.
of course. Well, you know why it's under science fiction is because Mike Mammy is the one who suggested it.
Oh, I'm aware.
Terry asks, what do you see are current market trends, either trends editors and agents are hunting for or ones that are oversaturated?
I think in fantasy, a lot of the trends, at least this is what I'm telling myself as I'm revising my own book, is that there's a lot of pushing the envelope in terms of, can I really take this book there? And the answer is yes, take it there and then take it further and make it extreme and extra. And people really like that. I was just, so like Baruch Cormorant is extra and takes it there, and Gideon the same way. And a lot of those things are people, I get the sense that, if you were subbing a book like that, you might think, is this too much? Like, is it a little bit too much in many different ways? And the answer seems to be from readers, no, it's not, and also give us more. So I think that pulling back on the reins is not a current market trend. In fact, it's do it and then do it more.
I would say as far as women's fiction goes, and this speaks probably to how everybody's feeling right now, is a lot of escapism and aspirational beachy reads. Give us vacation spots, something to take our mind off the day-to-day.
As far as romance goes, I think the romantic comedy is still pretty much selling well. I'm hoping that Rosie Dannon's idea of the horny romantic comedy takes off, because that's fantastic.
Raunch-com, I'm here for them.
Totally. Yeah, and I have seen in the same vein that people have been saying they kind of want to see people back off of the real hard, dark moment, because like right now we just can't deal. So, sort of like smooth that out a little bit.
Everyone's saying no pandemics.
Pandemics.
No.
Although I do want to see the horror movie on Zoom. I haven't seen it yet.
All right. Lee asks, for the 10 pages, headers and page numbers, chapter page breaks, don't include headers and page numbers. There's actually a blog post on the Pitchwars website right now. So if you go to pitchwars.org, it's one of the pinned posts. So it'll be one of the top 4 posts. And it tells you exactly how to format everything. And then there's also a video if that works better for you. So if you have any formatting questions or things about the form, please go and watch that video, because it's going to be very helpful for you, and read that post as well. Emily asked, oh gosh, everything jumped again. There we go. What's the difference between urban fantasy and contemporary fantasy?
I think that a lot of things that are called contemporary fantasy are called that because urban fantasy was out of fashion for a long time, and it's just a marketing thing. There's not really a difference. You could say urban fantasy is dealing with creatures, vampires, werewolves, supernatural creatures, whereas contemporary fantasy can be broader in general. But a lot of things that maybe 10 years ago would have been called urban fantasy just get called contemporary fantasy because of marketing.
Yeah, my book that came out in 2015, we called it contemporary fantasy, and it is urban fantasy. I can say for a fact that is happening. Yeah. Some people do like to use contemporary fantasy, especially if it takes place in a more rural setting, because the urban fantasy implies a city setting.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that too. A lot of people sharing their comfort reads in the comments. Oh, are you ever tempted to self-publish and just be done? What makes you stick with the traditional route?
I'm hybrid. I started self-published and my book got picked up by a traditional publisher, but I'll always be hybrid. I enjoy both. I enjoy control of certain things. And so when I run it to the end of the amount that I can control in traditional publishing, I can always turn to self-publishing and exercise and get that out of my system. And when I'm super frustrated with one, going back and forth makes the most sense for me personally. There's benefits to both. There's detriments to both. They both will drive you absolutely crazy. So I think it's good to have a foot in both worlds.
I'm also hybrid, and yeah, what she said. I'm
also hybrid. But I will say, I listen to a lot of self-publishing podcasts, and honestly, it's the pace. I can't keep up with a pace to be a successful self-published author. They write so quickly, they publish so quickly. It's very difficult.
Yeah, that's true. There's so much to learn and keep up with, not just the writing pace, but all the marketing and all the different things to do for marketing.
Yeah.
I'm far more intimidated by self-publishing than by traditional publishing. So hats off to you.
I really like the aspects of it that give you the creativity, like you were saying, you can do your own artwork, you can do your own, it's a lot of work. Sorry, Ian.
I was just going to say the idea of self-marketing scares me, so I'm not going there.
All right, well, that is all the time we have today. Thank you all so much for coming out and answering everyone's questions. I also want to say thank you to Lee Marr, who was live tweeting some of this on Twitter, and was also, she didn't have to bring over any questions today, but she had an eye out for questions. And also thank you to Lodestar or DT in the comments who moderated the chat today. And of course, thank you to our mentors who volunteered to come out and answer everyone's questions. So if you this is your moment for self-promotion. I always like to tell people that explicitly because they always try to be nice and not self-promote, but please self-promote. Tell us about your books, tell us about your events, and also let us know where you can find you on the internet. And I'm going to bring up your Twitter handles as well. So just go ahead and start with Marianne.
Okay, again, I'm publishing under 2 different names. So I have a book out with Kensington. So I talk about traditional. This is Crushing It. It came out in July. Again, it's under a different name. And you can find me under Lorelei M. Parker. M is for middle name. And I also have a series out that started with Kensington. You can see up on the wall there, my other first book, Some Kind of Magic, but this is the 4th book in the series. It just came out, kind of a big deal, which I did myself. You like my cover? I did my cover. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I like it. And you can find me on pretty much everywhere under Marianne Marlowe or Marlowe Marianne on Facebook.
Love Lessons, an Audible Originals audiobook, is available now. I wrote it and narrated it. And the rehearsals you can add on Goodreads, but won't be out until spring 2021. You can find me on Twitter far too often.
So I've got 3 novels and 2 novellas in the Earthsinger Chronicles that are out now. I self-published the 2 novellas. And yeah, so I'm turned in the 4th book, and that will be out next year. And I'm on Instagram and Twitter at the same handle, Leslie Penelope.
I have no book things I can talk about at the moment, but you can find me on Twitter all the time at IamBarnes, and my website is the same thing, just iambarnes.com.
So you can find me on Twitter, and please ask me questions. I'd love to talk to all of you. I have a short story out in the September issue of Prismatica Science Fiction Fantasy magazine. I have a story coming out in the spring with the sci-fi fantasy anthology Don't Touch That, about parents in sci-fi fantasy. Hopefully, if you're following Twitter, then you can watch me try to publish this monster fantasy book that I'm writing right now. Thanks for having us, and please talk to us.
And
On
happy
Twitter.
birthday.
And happy
Happy
birthday.
birthday.
Birthday, Sarah.
And I'm Sarah Nicolas. This is my YouTube channel, so if you want to subscribe, that'd be cool. On Saturday, we have a special episode of Pub Talk Live, which is my live publishing talk show that features numbers are hard, 5 pitchwars volunteers, and we're going to talk about behind the scenes pitchwar stuff, what it takes to like put the contest on. And so that's at 9 p.m. at the regular time. I am locked out of my Twitter right now. I don't know if you've heard me complain about it. It's really upsetting to me. I can't tweet, I can't like, and I can't retweet. So if you want to tweet at me, you can find me at Pub Talk Live, because that's the Twitter for the show. But also, if you want to tell Twitter support that you want me back, that'd be cool too. Happy birthday to me. Yeah. So just thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And everyone stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.